Hey, Josh SOHOLT, Public Land Meat Company, and right now we are going to be breaking down 4/4 of deer meat. And now this is kind of the quick and dirty version. This is just, we are going to be making different sausages out of all of this meat. So we're not going to be worrying about cuts, not going to be worrying about being really particular around seams. We're going to make some burger, make some sausage, get it off the bone in a hurry, and get it done type of quarter breakdown. So here we go. All right, so we're just going to start with this front quarter, and this one actually is what took the broadhead. So you can kind of see there's a bad spot in there where the broadhead went through, which was a nicely placed arrow, what I think Sam was responsible for. Yeah, we'll get this thing cut up. So to start, I'm just going to cut off some of these larger chunks of fat, and you do want to pull your deer fat off when you're processing your meat. It just makes the flavor of the meat taste better at the end. There are animals where the fat enhances the flavor. If you're a really, really big fan of deer game flavor, then I guess by all means leave the fat on. But the more fat you pull off, the cleaner that meat will taste and the less gamey it will be in the end. With front quarters, kind of what I always look for and how I always start is that shoulder is a plate and then there's a ridge that comes off the top of that plate. And you can kind of feel that with your knife and hear it, as you go across the outside of that quarter. I just kind of start almost like doing a duck breast or a pheasant breast or whatever along that bone, and I keep my knife angled, down and in towards that plate, and I just kind of find my way up and down that seam on both sides. So that's one side, and here's the other side, and on this side would be towards the body or the inside. That will always have a plate down there, which is the shoulder plate. And I just kind of find the bottom corner of that with my knife, and then I sort of start to turn the corner, much like you would pulling the back straps off the spine. Kind of dig in along that seam, turn the corner, and then just kind of fillet all that out from one end of that to the other. And you're going to find that joint towards the bottom and where that lower leg starts. And just kind of work your knife in there and continue to separate that meat from the bone. And so after I get past that plate, just kind of staying along that bone all the way out to the knee joint. Just keep that knife angle down and low and towards the bone. You kind of see the entire interior of that front quarter is just going to kind of come lopping off in relatively short order. But right when I started doing this, fronts were always kind of a nightmare to debone because I could just never really wrap my head around getting around that center plate. But once you kind of figure that out, it's very simple. So this also had where that broadhead went through. So kind of just flatten that out. And since we're not really worrying about cuts, I'm just going to kind of average out where I think we're not going to run into trouble anymore. It's like a couple blood spots there as well. Just lop those off quick. And then kind of just trying to stay tight to that wound, so that we're not wasting a whole lot of meat around it, but definitely getting all of it out. Just going to work our way through there. And most of that's bruised in some way or another. We'll discard that. Looks like one blade found its way down here. Just fillet that out. Cut a little of that off the side on the way by. Bingo. One little other stain there, perfect. We'll just strip this a couple times so the grinder likes it a little better. And when you're doing this, I always rinse everything when I start, and then as I'm going, undoubtedly there's going to be a few extra pieces of deer hair. And sort of at every step of the process, I'm just kind of constantly pulling out couple deer hairs here and there, and by the time you get to the finished product, typically there's very, very minimal to deal with. All right, and then we'll get the front going. So the front doesn't blade out quite as much, a little smaller piece of meat as well. But as soon as you find that gap where that white quits, kind of change your knife angle, get down below it, and make that cut. You're going to get in by that knee again, slop it off right there because you got a whole bunch of bone and stuff you don't want to work around there. And just work this piece of meat down a little bit, get that cleaned up. Perfect. And from there, it's just kind of working into that bone, down to the joint, pulling off lumps of meat as you can. And sort of how I like to do it is I just, rather than working really detailed into each aspect off the beginning, I kind of get all of the big stuff off and out of the way, and then I'll spend a few minutes just kind of getting right down to that bone and trying to get every little last bit of meat off of it as I can. Shave off a little bit of this, the back of the plate here, all the way down to the knee. Let's see what all we can claim out of that. So yeah, then I'll just kind of start here way up at this shoulder blade and just really start to get detailed and work all those little meat pieces off of there that I can. Cool, I think that plate's about whipped. We'll work a little further down the joint. And it is pretty remarkable just how much meat you honestly end up with when you just take a little extra time to really dig in and get all these little chunks. It adds up. A little tedious, but you worked really hard to probably get the animal in the first place. You know, the last thing you want to do is not utilize as much of it as you could. And that is pretty darn cleaned up. So we're going to call it good there. Next, I'm going to talk about a hind a little bit. Hinds are easier, and there's this big tenon here. I'm just going to lop this off to begin with. I kind of, usually when I do hinds just for burger or sausage, I kind of start where the meat starts. I just make a cut all the way around. And then I just start to peel it back almost like petals. So just stay close to that bone, work your way all the way around the bone, and just kind of cut down and along that bone from your initial circular cut. And that meat will start to just kind of petal off the, it looks like we're going to get that off there right now. Off of that bone, just like this. And as you get lower, I just kind of keep picking it up then cutting around that rear joint. Into all those beautiful rounds and roasts and everything that we are paying absolutely no attention to right now because it's all going through the grinder. But just kind of keep your knife at blade angle along that femur and heavy bones. And just keep kind of circling. And that entire leg will just start to emerge out of there. Just like so. Bang. That's a deboned hind. So now I'll kind of go through that same process of just cleaning up this hind and getting all these little bits of meat off. And then we'll clean this up, strip that out, and get it ready for the grinder. So that's it, deboning a front and hind. Thanks for following along.